Energy policy in New England is the pinnacle of human stupidity, and as always, it's the poor and the working class that are paying the price for it. During this recent cold spell, people across the New England states have opened their utility bills only to see a balance due amount that might have passed for a mortgage payment just a few years earlier. And while politicians and bureaucrats pretend to be surprised and outraged by these bills, it's important for the people of New England to understand that this is being done to you on purpose, ostensibly to fight climate change. And to add insult to injury, these policies have been so poorly thought out and executed that the net result of them is actually an increase in fossil fuel consumption and thus more carbon emissions on top of all the pain you're feeling in your wallet. Meanwhile, there's an ocean of natural gas just a few miles away from New England, but thanks to bureaucrats at the state and federal level, along with the people who throw soup at paintings, that natural gas might as well be on the surface of the moon. And even though the United States is now the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world, thanks to a century-old law aimed at protecting U.S. shipping interests, New England is being forced to pay to import LNG from thousands of miles away. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and this morning on X, I saw this thread from Steve Everly at FTI Consulting about the situation on the ground in Massachusetts and the greater New England area. And Steve is talking here about how politicians are pretending to be surprised, but really it's their fault and they've done this on purpose. I'll put a link to this thread down below. There's some eye-opening information in there. Now, there was a very interesting reply in that thread from Rod Adams, the author of Atomic Insights, that included this screenshot from the Energy Information Administration. Now, this is showing the spot prices of natural gas and electricity in different regions throughout the United States. And there, underlined in red, you can see just how obscene the prices in New England have become. New England is paying $20.21 per million BTUs for natural gas, which is almost 5 times the average being paid anywhere outside of New England. The second highest here is the Mid-Atlantic, which isn't even half as expensive as New England is, even though the Mid-Atlantic states are right next to New England. And when it comes to electricity, New England only fares marginally better, coming in at second place for the second most expensive electric in the country, just a few dollars behind New York City. And this just goes to show you the disparity of energy prices across the United States. Compare the rates we're seeing in New England to something like Houston, where the rates for gas and electric are closer to a tenth of what they are up in New England. And as Steve Everly pointed out in that thread, this is all being done by design. This is being done to you on purpose. Take this Order on Regulatory Principles and Framework from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, dated December 6, 2023. Now, the purpose of this document was to investigate the Department of Public Utilities on its own motion into the role of natural gas and local distribution companies as the Commonwealth achieves their 2050 climate goals. But it is this one line of text that really sticks out here. On page 15 of the document, they had this to say: as in the case of the transition to clean energy in the electricity sector, the decarbonization of the natural gas industry may result in higher costs being imposed on ratepayers. Given the urgency of addressing the climate crisis, however, we are reluctant to slow the pace at which the transition must occur due to concerns about affordability for low and moderate income utility customers. They are saying right here that we know this is going to hurt poor people in the middle class. We don't care. Our climate agenda is more important, and therefore your pain is a price they are willing to pay. Keep that in mind as all of these politicians are pretending to be shocked and outraged at how high these bills have become. Now, I already showed you from that EIA chart how natural gas is almost 5 times the national average in the New England states, but it turns out it's not just the gas itself that is so expensive in New England. It's actually the delivery charges. Check this one out from WCVB in Boston. Massachusetts residents fuming over skyrocketing gas bills. And what Ben Simonow found here was pretty interesting. Now, besides anecdotes, including one guy who had a $731 natural gas bill for an 1,800 square foot condo, but it turns out it's the delivery charges that are really driving this bill. The surge is not being fueled by the price of natural gas, which is actually down from highs reached in 2022, but rather by the delivery fees charged by the state's utilities. A good part of those delivery fees go to fund the state's Mass Save program, paying rebates to customers who switch their heating away from natural gas and other fossil fuels. The new Mass Save plan cost 25% more than the previous plan. An Eversource gas bill from 2 years ago in January of 2023 shows that the delivery and the supply both made up about half of the bill. But over the last 2 years, the delivery charge exploded, rising 30 to 38% for Eversource customers and 31% for National Grid customers. Those increases were signed off on by state regulators at the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. Remember, the people who said your pain was a price they're willing to pay. With the most recent increase taking effect on November 1st, no one from the DPU would appear on camera for this story. I wonder why. However, much of these rate increases are going to fund the state-mandated Mass Save program. Mass Save requires utility companies to pay rebates to customers for switching to electric heat, which state leaders argue will be better for the environment over time as the electric grid gets an increasing amount of energy from renewable sources. The rebates are paid for by gas and electric customers through delivery fees. So they're making people pay this bill so that their neighbors can switch over from natural gas to electric heat. Okay, great. So where's the electricity coming from? It turns out most of New England's electricity comes from, you guessed it, natural gas. Now, here's the problem with that, guys. Natural gas power plants only operate at a thermal efficiency of about 35%. So when you switch over from natural gas heat to electric heat, and half of that electric comes from natural gas, which is 35% efficient, you're actually burning about 60% more natural gas in order to heat the same home. In other words, more fossil fuel consumption and even more carbon emissions. Wait, wasn't the whole point to fight climate change? It's also overlooking the fact that the same politicians and activists that are forcing these plans down people's throats are also the same people who forced the early closure of half of New England's nuclear power plants over the last 12 years. Now, it really does defy belief that New England could possibly be starving for natural gas. How is it possible that gas is so expensive when just 250 miles to the west of Boston lies the Utica and Marcellus Shale, the largest and most productive natural gas field in the entire Western Hemisphere? The problem is this literal ocean of natural gas can't get through the blue wall that is the politicians in the Northeast United States. For years, energy companies have been trying to build a pipeline to bridge the gap between the Utica and the Marcellus Shale and that starving market in New England. Take this example, the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline Project. It's shown up here in red that would have connected pipelines in western New York to the pipeline system in New England, which would have allowed that ocean of gas in the Marcellus and Utica region to flow into New England. But after years of protests and lawsuits, the cost of that project ballooned so out of control that Kinder Morgan pulled the plug on that pipeline project in 2016. Another proposed pipeline project was the Access Northeast Pipeline. Now, the crazy thing about this project is it didn't even need the construction of an entire pipeline. They just wanted to build those little sections up there shown in yellow in order to bridge disconnects in the existing Algonquin transmission system. Just those little sections in yellow shown there would have been enough to bridge the gap to bring that gas from Pennsylvania all the way to Boston. But just like the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline, in 2017, after years of lawsuits and protests, Enbridge halted the $3.2 billion Access Northeast natural gas pipeline. And last but not least is the Constitution Pipeline Project, the most recent attempt. Now that's shown up here in red. The Constitution Project would have flowed through New York, connecting Northeast Pennsylvania with a compressor station in New York that also is a junction with other pipelines that flow into New England. But just like all those other projects, years of protest and delays by bureaucrats caused Williams to cancel that project back in 2020. Now, the Trump administration has made this pipeline a priority for their second term. We'll see if they have more luck this time around. They also made it a priority during Trump's first term, and well, you see how that ended. Now, since we can't utilize pipelines, which is by far the cheapest, safest, and most environmentally sound way to move natural gas, the next alternative is to bring natural gas in via LNG tankers, where you chill natural gas to ridiculously low temperatures to the point where it liquefies, load it onto a ship, sail it into the port, and then regasify it into the pipelines. Now, luckily, the United States is the largest producer of LNG in the world, so you would think this would mean, despite it being a little bit more expensive, there's plenty of US LNG that could very easily flow into New England. After all, the Cove Point LNG export terminal in Maryland is only about 650 miles by ship from the Everett Marine Terminal in Boston, where they import liquefied natural gas. And so, all right, if we can't use a pipeline 200 miles away to take the gas from Pennsylvania, then at least we could take the gas from Maryland that's only about 650 miles away by ship, right? Nope, we can't do that either, thanks to the Jones Act, which was passed in 1920. It's a federal law that requires that goods shipped between U.S. ports are transported on ships built, owned, and operated by U.S. citizens or permanent residents. In other words, international ships can't operate from U.S. port to U.S. port. They can only come from a foreign port to a U.S. port, and then they have to go back to a foreign port. Okay, no problem. Then all we need is an LNG tanker that is built, owned, and operated by U.S. citizens. Yeah, about that. There is not one single Jones Act compliant LNG tanker anywhere on the face of the earth. And so since there is no ship capable of transporting LNG from U.S. port to U.S. port, the United States, the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, is forced to import liquefied natural gas in order to meet New England's demand. So where does that come from? Once again, the U.S. Energy Information Administration has the data. Almost all U.S. LNG imports are delivered into the New England market at import terminals in the Boston, Massachusetts area, Constellation Energy's Everett LNG facility in Boston Harbor, and Accelerate Energy's Northeast Gateway in Massachusetts Bay. This past winter, again, they're talking about 2022, the two terminals received 9 LNG cargoes from Trinidad and Tobago, totaling 16.8 billion cubic feet of natural gas. That's right, folks. Why pipe in natural gas from just 250 miles away in the Marcellus and Utica Shale region when you can instead liquefy it in Maryland and send it 650 miles on a ship and then regasify it? But then again, we've got the Jones Act, so why do that when you can ship it 2,500 miles all the way across the equator through the entirety of the Northern Hemisphere? From Trinidad and Tobago. That is where New England is getting their natural gas from. The most expensive natural gas in the United States, the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, comes from 2,500 miles away in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe some of the climate activists and the bureaucrats who are telling us we need to pay $20 per million BTUs for natural gas in New England could explain how it's better for the environment to super chill natural gas in Trinidad and sail it across the ocean 2,500 miles powered by fossil fuels instead of sending it by pipe from Pennsylvania. That's also overlooking the fact that this is a massive drain on GDP because we are importing energy when we could be buying it from ourselves. So long story short, New England's energy policy literally is the pinnacle of human stupidity. Corrupt politicians and activists have conspired to drive up utility bills for the poor and working class. They admitted to it in their state documents. They don't care because climate, a huge aspect of those utility bills going up is that Mass Save program, which forces people to bankroll their neighbors switching from natural gas to electric heat, which ironically results in additional consumption of natural gas. God forbid we build a pipeline in this country to safely and reliably transmit gas 250 miles from one state to another, when instead we have to bring in liquefied natural gas more than 2,500 miles from Trinidad and Tobago, even though the United States is the biggest exporter of LNG in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you New England's energy policy. Till next time, live small and dream big.